when you boot up 2019's Link's Awakening remake, you hear this song. But did you know that on an obscure part of Nintendo's Japanese website, the game's composer posted an earlier version of that same theme, which sounds very different? For what purpose was this strange song written? Well, that's not the only Nintendo music mystery. Have you ever wondered where Koopa Troopers' strange voice clips come from? And did you know about the secret song from Mario Maker 2 that you can only hear if you have a slow internet connection? In this video, I'll round up some more of my favourite music secrets from Mario, Zelda, Splatoon, and more. Let's go! Number 1. I want to start by talking about Koopa Troopers, some of the most recognisable Mario enemies. Here's their talking voice. This voice has appeared in Mario Party, Mario Kart, Mario Golf, but it can be traced back to its first appearance in Super Mario 64, where it can be heard as the voice of one very specific Koopa Trooper, Koopa the Quick. During the game's development, it came down to Super Mario 64's sound designer, Yoji Inagaki, to give this character a brand new voice. And rather than record a new sound effect himself, Inagaki used a pre-existing sound clip from a sound effect library, Voice Spectral Volume 1. The sound effect in question is called Human Yell, Yell Female. First, Inagaki cut the sound effect down to only the first few seconds. Then he repeated the clip at slightly different speeds. And voila! Koopa the Quick's voice was created. A similarly edited sound was used when the player kills a Goomba, Koopa, or Flying Shy Guy. In later Mario spin-offs, like Mario Kart Double Dash through to 8 Deluxe, not only that first section of the sound, but also parts from the rest of the scream are included as part of Koopa Troopas' voice. Take a listen. So, there you have it. That is how a startling scream became the iconic voice of the Koopas. Number 2. Next, let's talk about Luigi's Mansion 2. I've previously talked about the iconic piano theme, which this brainiac ghost plays on the piano in the library. But what I find interesting is that this same song appears throughout Luigi's Mansion 2 in various arrangements as a sort of recurring Easter egg. First, there's the gramophone in Gloomy Manor's parlour. It sounds almost identical to the version played on the library piano, right? But then there's this organ in the conservatory of Haunted Towers. As you can hear, the ghost plays a different rendition of that same melody. Elsewhere in Haunted Towers, we come across this playroom full of music boxes, and the theme they play sounds like this. And finally, in the family room, there's this retro-looking jukebox. Take a listen. So I love how this one theme appears throughout multiple mansions of the game, arranged in a number of different musical styles. Number 3. Now let's talk about Splatoon 3. This one isn't super subtle, but it's so cool that I couldn't leave it out. So Splatoon 3 introduces the new idol group Deep Cut. and their signature tune, Anarchy Rainbow. But during specific Splatfests, the version of Anarchy Rainbow that Deep Cut performs sounds a little different. First, here's the Splatoon version. Then here's the Frosty Fest version. Next, the Spring Fest version. And finally, the Summer Nights version. All of those different arrangements of the theme are super interesting to listen to. Of course, they're not the only variations of Anarchy Rainbow. There's versions from Nintendo's live concerts, plus the stage version from the Grand Festival. But it's the seasonal themed variations that are, I think, the most interesting. Now, the Splatoon devs themselves haven't discussed this adaptive music, but the topic came up during an in-universe interview between all of Splatoon's various idols. Apparently, it was Fry's idea, but Big Man was the one who actually had to put in all the work and rearrange Anarchy Rainbow. Poor guy. Number 4. One of the most iconic parts of 2017's Super Mario Odyssey is the song Jump Up Superstar. This tune serves as a kind of love letter to the entire Mario series. And I'm not just talking about the lyrics. It's fairly well known by now that during the bridge section, Jump Up Superstar's bass line hides an interesting secret. It's ripped directly out of the original Donkey Kong's Stage 1 theme. But it turns out that's not the only musical reference to the arcade Donkey Kong. When you jump over a barrel or pick up an item, this short sound effect plays. And take a listen to a certain part of Jump Up Superstar. It's that very same sound effect. It's even in the same key. What a neat reference. Number 5. Now, while we're talking about Mario, let's move on to Super Mario Maker 2. If you select Course World from the main menu, you can access boatloads of online courses. You can even search for courses by game style, course theme, tags, and more. But obviously, that relies on you having a decent internet connection. So to simulate slow internet, I connected to my phone's mobile hotspot and then moved it to a different room of my house, and then searched for something overly specific, like for region, my region only, for difficulty, super expert, and so on, and listen to what happens when I press search. If searching takes more than a few seconds, we're treated to a snippet of the original Super Mario Bros. Ground theme, which is a nice consolation prize of sorts for having to wait a while. Actually, it's not the regular Super Mario Bros. Ground theme that plays, but rather the sped up version that plays when you're running out of time. Which is fitting, since you'll be feeling more than a little impatient while you wait for your search to load. Number 6. Next, I want to talk about a Zelda enemy, this thing called Pole's Voice. That's kind of a strange name, right? And when you first meet one of these things in the original Legend of Zelda, you'll find they're no pushovers. In fact, they can be a real challenge to defeat. If you look into the game manual, the following description is listed. A ghost with big ears and a weak point. He hates loud noise. Alright, simple. Take out your recorder and nothing happens. In fact, their actual weakness is arrows, nothing to do with noise at all. So, what's going on here? Well, it turns out the Japanese Famicom console actually has a microphone in the Player 2 controller. And in the Japanese version of the game, if this microphone detects a loud noise, say blowing into the mic for instance, then all of the Pole's voices on screen die. That explains the name Pole's Voice. Now, as the international NES console has no controller mic, Nintendo gave Pole's Voices a new weakness, that being arrows. But when the Japanese game manual was translated into English, the description for Pole's Voice was directly translated word for word, rather than replacing that noise hint with something to direct players towards arrows. Incidentally, Zelda 1 has been re-released on many later Nintendo consoles, and for the Japanese versions of the game, these Pole's Voice enemies have been adapted somewhat. The GBA, Wii, Famicom Classic Mini, and Zelda Game & Watch all lack microphones, so their versions of Zelda 1 have new button combinations which replace the effect of blowing into the mic, except for the Classic Mini, which is therefore quite hard. But the Wii U and 3DS both have inbuilt microphones, which can therefore be used to trigger that same insta-death effect. But what about the Switch? Well, seeing as the Switch has no microphone, pressing ZR and R, or ZL and L, kills Pole's Voices right away. But when Nintendo released the Famicom-style Joy-Cons, they actually included a microphone in Controller 2. And watch what happens when this microphone detects a loud noise. Number 7. Next, I want to talk about the Mario Ground theme. This is one of the most iconic pieces of video game instrumental music, except that's not completely true, because it turns out there's actually official lyrics for this iconic tune. And no, I'm not talking about Do the Mario from the Super Mario Bros. Super Show. Do the Marios! No, that song had no input at all from the Mario creators over in Japan. But that's not the case when it comes to Go Go Mario. The story goes that listeners of the long-running Japanese radio show All Night Nippon were asked to submit their own fan-created lyrics for the Super Mario theme, and the very best set of lyrics would be turned into a real song. And here was the result. Now, to be clear, All Night Nippon was heavily collaborating with Nintendo around this time. This isn't a case of a radio station doing their own weird, unofficial thing. and Nintendo have referenced these lyrics multiple times in the years since. For instance, in 2003, when Nintendo put together a big band jazz concert of Mario and Zelda songs, they included Go Go Mario. Take a listen. And then, in 2015, to help build up hype for the release of Super Mario Maker, Nintendo teamed up with a major karaoke chain in Japan to bring Go Go Mario to karaoke machines across the country. So, while these lyrics haven't quite cropped up in an official Mario game yet, they've been around since the 80s, and they're still being used decades later. Number 8. Finally, let's talk about Link's Awakening, specifically the Nintendo Switch remake. So, when Nintendo began work on this remake, the game's composer, Ryo Nagamatsu, had to figure out how to turn the Game Boy game's chiptune soundtrack into something more modern sounding. But what instruments to use? A full orchestra? A jazz band? Ryo Nagamatsu started with the intro and title theme, which sound like this on the Game Boy. According to Nagamatsu himself, Zelda games often use grand orchestras for their music, and when I'm working on an original project, I tend to want to make it flashy. But an orchestra wouldn't match this game's visuals, so I stuck to a small ensemble. In other words, rather than having a string section of 40 to 50 musicians, like in an orchestra, Nagamatsu decided to go with something more on the scale of chamber music, with one of each different kind of instrument. And since Zelda games need vigor and energy, Nagamatsu tried arranging the theme for a brass band. Take a listen. However, Ryo Nagamatsu wasn't happy with the result. He said, "Although I didn't use an orchestra, it still sounds like typical Zelda music. Link's Awakening is a Zelda game whose story and characters feel unique within the Zelda series. Therefore, I had to change my assumptions about how to make a Zelda soundtrack." And so, here is what Nagamatsu came up with. Wow, that's certainly pretty out there. That singing voice is almost certainly Nagamatsu's own voice, by the way, which adds an extra layer to the whole thing. Now, this was just a prototype, as Ryo Nagamatsu put it, and it didn't make it into the final game. Here is what he eventually landed on. Sounds good, right? And pretty different from his previous prototype. Still, it was necessary for Nagamatsu to change his way of thinking in order to end up with the brilliantly arranged soundtrack of the Link's Awakening remake. And that totally bizarre title screen theme was an important part of that process. Now, those two work-in-progress themes, the brass arrangement and the more unusual one, were posted on a blog on Nintendo's Japanese website, but I've seen almost no one talk about them online or share the recordings anywhere, and so that's what I wanted to do in this video. But that's all for today. Thank you very much to my Patreon supporters for helping make videos like this one possible. A special shout out goes to Alison Withernall, Brett and Eric, Candy Crystal, Cyprian Eoff, Daryl Gero, Ellie Birnbaum, Eliza the Doe, Evan Kinney, Hi There and Bye, Jim Gilsonan, Kieran Chan, Kelly Wright, Lucas Little, Michael Gunter, Skator Pie, Thomas Sutherland, and Tlazot Lalia.